Welcome to the Stories Forever channel and invite you to watch the video with our new author's story. Alina, for the umpteenth time today, looked around the ceiling, carefully examining every crack in the plaster. Every speck and a large slap of lime in the corner, similar in contours to a bat. Then also in detail. I looked at the faint ornament on the faded curtains. The broken handle of the window sash, which everyone knew was not to be touched, but still invariably grabbed it. Several times a day. Then it was the turn of rosettes, a spiked chair, a small sink and 3 adjacent beds in the hospital room, except her own. The inspection was completed by a door covered with so many layers of paint that you could have fun and try. By its ragged edge, count how many times it was repaired. She was terribly tired of all this, but there was nothing else to do. The phone screen ached my eyes and head. Everything she could guess in the Crossford collection without peeping into the answers she has already written. And even circled several times with a pen. And when trying to read a book from the hospital library, instantly a sleepy stupefaction piled up, from which then the same head ached. In addition, yesterday Alina, who had dozed off, very noticeably hit herself in the face with a book that fell on her, after which, for some time I was offended by the printed word. She didn't want to eat, not in the sense that she had no appetite at all. Alina Drozdova, née Samokhina, has an appetite. Everything was in order, both in the mentioned maidenhood and in the status of a married lady. It's just that here, in the hospital, sweets and flour were absorbed imperceptibly and in huge quantities. This threatened those. That she would simply have nothing to leave in after she did not fit into her clothes. Realizing this, Alina imposed a strict ban on herself regarding sweets, cookies, gingerbread and buns. From the fruit, an unnecessary transformation began. Since childhood, she could not stand milk, so from food entertainment. Clean drinking water remained. And the hope that the porridge sold for dinner will still look like food, and not like cardboard boxes soaked in water. Lying on her right side, Alina carefully, with habitual movements, holding the large, long-lived belly, rolled over to the left and stared at the wall with a sigh. Alina did not know how to stay in hospitals at all. Moreover, she, in fact, did not really know how to lie down. No. Of course, she was a completely normal, ordinary person who simply needed to take a horizontal position to rest and sleep. And she spent the last couple of months in an unusual immobility for herself. But before, in the morning, she always literally jumped up, as soon as she woke up and opened her eyes. And even habits just. For example, she never had to lie down on a day off. The fact is that Alina spent her childhood, adolescence, and part of her relatively adult life in an environment that those who know their family. People chuckled and called it a camp of not very strict regime. Of course, it was a joke, and yet the concept of regime was not an abstraction or an empty phrase for Alina. Alina was born and raised in the village, and the head of their family for many years was their grandmother Zinaida Grigorievna, completely. Who promoted her only daughter Irina and her husband, respectively, her son-in-law Alexei, in this role. True, at the very beginning of their married life, the young people tried to establish rules that suited them, but they quickly. It is explained who is in charge here. Proposed to get out of the large family house built by Zinani's grandfather and to establish their own rules elsewhere if something does not suit them. The newlyweds thought hard, consulted, weighed all the pros and cons and proudly stayed. Moreover, the conditions put forward for cohabitation were quite acceptable. Irina was already happily and frightened listening to the unusual sensations inside her, and Alexei spent a lot of time sitting on the roof of the renovated house. Zinaida Grigorievna was a very remarkable and famous personality not only for the entire large densely populated village, but also into a district, in terms of area, comparable to a small European state. At the same time, Zinaida's remarkability was a multifaceted concept. Firstly, she was very beautiful, especially in her youth. Tall, stately, blue-eyed, with a blush all over her cheek, yes. As a mockery of those who do not believe in Slavic genes with a thick blonde braid. Young Zina Gromova at one time broke more than one man's heart, especially upon returning to her native village after graduating from the Pedagogical Institute. And then, indifferently loading these very broken hearts into a cart and a small cart, she jumped out to marry the unknown. Where the agronomist came from? No, it came from nowhere. From the city on distribution, as a young specialist. But for some reason, instead of fully devoting yourself to raising grain yields, preparing the soil for sowing and pest control, he suddenly began to court Zinaida. And instead of doing to him the same as with the previous suitors, that is, to send him away, she suddenly began to embarrassed and blushing, and then she married him altogether. That's what it means to live in the city while I was studying and spoiled myself there. Instead of normal people of the city whip, she. Give it to me, the offended retired suitors waved their hand. Well, it's okay, she'll suit him, this city dude. He will run away from Zinka like giving him a drink. Would-be mothers-in-law giggled. Secondly, the character of a woman was in no way inferior to her appearance in terms of brightness and originality. It was the character that had in the. When they lamented the unenviable fate of Zinaida's city husband. She was decisive, quick. Actions and language, desperately brave and not femininely independent. Oh, Zinka should have become a teacher. She would go to a place where they train her to be a boss, she would get to the government. Acquaintances laughed. This is not a woman, but a commander-in-chief in a skirt. Thirdly, having received a higher education, she then for many years pushed this very education into the stubborn heads of many generations of district children. With a diploma as a teacher of Russian language and literature, Zinaida has mastered the program for 30 years of her teaching experience. In almost all subjects and in the conditions of a total shortage of teachers in the district school, she managed to teach everything from due to her by the diploma of literature before her work, and for boys. The power of the Ministry of Education does not extend to our district, the locals joked. We have our own minister. How? Our Zita Grigorievna will say, so it will be. And Zinaida, who, in addition to teaching hours, also took on the care of Zok, and then the school principal, year after year. Released a new generation of students, to rearrange them long ago. Despite the skeptical moods of her fellow villagers, the family life of the young teacher with her city partner flowed quite smoothly. Jaeger was a surprisingly calm and cool-headed person, and seemed to balance the temperament of his beautiful wife. But in fact, they just loved each other. And a year after the wedding, quite expectedly, the silence of the big house was broken by the demanding crying of baby Irina. Well, that's it, now he will start churning out children a piece a year. Well, how could it be otherwise? Zinaida, on the other hand, is so overwhelmed. The observers unanimously decided and were mistaken. Or maybe people jinxed the simple Zini for good luck. When Irina was 3 years old, Jaeger went hunting and did not return. It was found only in the spring after the snow melted, fell into a deep ravine and stumbled upon a fragment of the trunk sticking out of the ground. After some time, according to the rules of decency, an active movement began around Zinaida, by that time blooming full-fledged female beauty. But it seems that along with Jaeger, her feminine happiness fell into that damned Ovrik. And just like Igor, she did not get out. Habitually, as in the years of girlhood, she dispersed potential gentlemen and she was left alone with a little daughter in her arms. Irina grew up a copy of her mother in appearance and very similar to her father in character. Everyone who remembered Xenia's agronomist said so. Irina was very far from her combativeness and determination. Charismatic mother. And the lifelong title of Zachev's daughter was a strong obligation. Neither with studying, nor with building her fate, Irina did not complicate it. She graduated from the local technical school and found a life partner there, of course, from among the graduates of Zinaida Grigorievna. Well, honestly, Urka, at least you should consult with me, the woman laughed. I found someone to bring. Lyashka Samokin. It's necessary. The first bully at school, a parasite. I almost became a stutterer because of him when he put a live vorop in my bag. Zinaida, of course, forgave the good-for-nothing Samokin, and the big old house came to life again, spoke in different voices. Lit up by the evening windows. Soon Alina was born, and less than 3 years after the granddaughter, 2 boys arrived in the family with a difference of a year, Semyon and Anton. The company turned out to be noisy, crazy, and cheerful. In normal times, everything was more or less. After all, school, lessons. Section. But during the holidays, only the grandmother could cope with the Samoka Freeman. Irina and Alexei cowardly. They ran away to work early in the morning, and Zinaida Grigorievna took up the labor education of the younger generation. In the morning, Zinaida's famous, well-trained teacher's voice was heard in the house, with which she could to make the windows tremble and the hefty foreheads of high school students freeze in fright. Good morning, my dear grandchildren, heard the younger self whispers, trying with all their might to feign deep oblivion. Okay, there's no need to introduce yourself. I see that everyone has already woken up and is just eager to work for the benefit of our family. So. We get up, there is nothing to lie down on our sides. As you crunch cucumbers and crack jam in winter, so there is no end to you. But. How to weed the beds, and pick berries. Not with their mouths, boys, not with their mouths. This does not count. So there is no one for you. You'll be interrogated. Quickly wash, have breakfast and everything in the garden in the cold, while the sun is low and not all fried. Forces. After yesterday's rain, the weeds had grown so large that it was expensive for Luba to see. She squinted her eyes, surveyed the slightly sad young army and continued, Samushka, my angel, you are on the. Don't fall down, there's nothing to depict in a lame way. I remember very well how yesterday before going to bed on this very leg. The stairs jumped. Yes, I saw it, sorry, I'm sorry. And what is this sadness on your face, Antosha? My tummy hurts for something. Why would that? Isn't it the 9 sweets you ate yesterday? Not 9. And how much? 8. Well, just don't forget to remove the papers from under the pillow and share them with your brother and sister. Next time I shared. And well done with Dad. Something else? I swallowed the fly. Not a problem either. They are healing here. And I'm going to cure your tummy with mustard plaster. It no longer hurts. He recovered completely. Well, that's good. Go follow your dear brother to brush your teeth. Alinushka, sunshine, on you, as on the elder, complete control. 2.5 beds are behind you and are free on all 4 sides, my pigeons, until evening watering. And they looked at that the brothers of your dirty carrots did not eat enough, like last time. So jokingly, but persistently, my grandmother woke them up from their beds, fed them with fluffy crispy pancakes with honey on the edges. Or a juicy bright yellow omelette or something else inexpressibly morning and delicious, and sent her off with tasks for the garden. Frankly speaking, Alina herself did not like to lie in bed. There were too many interesting and important things around. And who invented that village life is boring and monotonous? Alina had never thought so. There were friends, a coded girlfriend Svetka, restless brothers, dogs and cats, and they have puppies and kittens, a neighbor's foal, an old house, still poor, which keeps a bunch of antique, mysterious things in the attic. Mom's bicycle, which is just right for her. There was a mighty birch tree with 3 huge trunks fused together, in the fork between which it was so comfortable to sit. There was a river, a meadow, a pine forest and countless other things at once, and I can't remember everything, there were not enough hours in the days, and also the grandmother with her tasks. Of course, she, as the eldest, understands that if you like sweet, fragrant strawberries then be kind at first, they disappeared a couple of times, then pull out the mustache, water after a hot day. Remove from the leaves and browning berries the nasty slugs that strive to be in time for the harvest faster than people, and only then with a clear conscience ask for mercy for the treat. Although here you also need to chew, because the younger brothers attack the ripening berry much more quickly. Slugs, and it is almost impossible to drive them away. And everything else, sweet radishes, crispy lumpy cucumbers, warm, as if they have absorbed the light and heat of the sun. Tomatoes, fragrant raspberries. All this required care and participation. But in addition to the huge vegetable garden, there was also an old garden with tall perennial, much older pears, plums and apple trees, whose branches almost lay on the roof of the house. Sometimes you could hear light blows and a quick rustling sound, with which an apple that fell on the roof rolled down. How many pants were torn on these trees, and how many scratches were received when trying to get the ripest juicy ones. Apples, always hanging as if they were evil, at the very top. However, with 2 nimble and fast brothers, like monkeys, chances. It was not enough to admire the beautiful fruits. While the boys were excitedly shaking the trees and getting in the way of their father's feet, as they say, around the house, Alina helped in the kitchen. This was also very interesting. And why do the girls I know hate learning to cook so much? For example, the same Sveta. Alina, a friend from the 1st grade, is so easily exhausted by her parents' attempts to involve her in peeling potatoes or frying cutlets. Maybe it's a matter of who teaches. With Grandma, for example, even cooking soup sometimes turned into an exciting conversation. Ugh, Grandma, are you cooking cabbage soup again? Wrinkled the nose, who did not respect cabbage very much. Again. My grandmother repeated ironically. Do you know that in Russia they ate cabbage soup all their lives day after day? And in general, cabbage soup is, perhaps, our most important thing. A national dish. And how many sayings have been composed, forgive me, ate cabbage soup, as if he put on a fur coat. The world is worth it. Where there is cabbage soup, look for us. Shkai is our food, Alina recalled happily. That's right, the grandmother nodded approvingly. So, granddaughter, my joy, you come from. Cut off the skin of the potatoes thinner. Where do you peel the tuber on the floor, child? No, the piglets, of course, will only thank you, but we must have something left. Yes. So, what are we talking about? Oh. It is impossible to count how many proverbs people have composed about their favorite dish. Unlike, by the way, borscht, with which there are almost no sayings. This is to the question, is borscht Russian? Do you know that Shkai in Russia was treated with special respect? Housewives for cabbage soup. They kept a separate pot and cared for it with special trepidation. And they even deliberately spelled it before cooking. Do you talk to the pot too? Asked Alina, rounding her eyes. And what about it? The grandmother nodded seriously. Of course, there is simply no way without it. And pots, and pans, and a thermos that your dad takes to work. When you grow up, I will pass them all on to you. Okay, Alinaka, you go, baby, go for a walk. Your friends have already wiped all the benches. And Svetka, your dear friend, has been hanging on the fence for half an hour. Grandma Zina chuckled. Go, or he will really say that I keep you all in a black body and exhaust you with work. The memories of grandmother's dishes and pickles made my stomach rumble loudly and unexpectedly. Alina even looked around frightened, but there was no one to scare her yet. Strangely, but since yesterday after 2 women lying next to her were discharged, Alina was completely alone in the hospital room, and even in a word. There is no one to exchange. No, of course, now she always has an interlocutor, the most important person in everything for her. Universe. This is her baby, who is quite sensitive and focused on pushing inside. Although Ollie sometimes. It seems that the guy has already fully mastered his limbs and frankly dances in her stomach, not at all constrained and limited space. But now even the baby was quiet. Obviously, he was asleep, unlike his good-for-nothing mother, who for some reason cannot just relax. And everything thinks. She thinks, and has already thought of God knows what. And she was left in the ward all alone. Maybe that's why time is dragging on especially slowly today, and thoughts about the past, about what it was like, creep into my head. Life is a long time ago, and how the last years, months, and especially the last days have passed, which she would gladly cross out of her life. And you don't want to think about the future at all, plan happily, be afraid, remember what you bought in huge quantities. A charming children's devotee, in general, to do everything that, it would seem, should be stuffed with her head now. Even eating your favorite candy, which is still allowed to yourself, which is lying on the bedside table, does not pull at all. In general, complete and deep apathy. But it shouldn't be like that. Frankly speaking, this is not how she imagined this period in her life, her pregnancy, especially her last weeks. After all, she and Mikhail had been waiting for it for so long, dreaming about it so much. She, who grew up in a large house surrounded by loving family, could not imagine life without children at all. At the same time, their family, noisy and active, was not at all considered large by the standards of their native village. For example, Svetlana's friend had one more brother than Alina, and as a bonus, there was also a younger sister. There should be many children in the family. With this belief, they grew and matured. True, most of her peers gradually moved away from this idea. The same Svetka, having suffered with the younger ones, who they followed her everywhere like tails, loudly declared that she personally would have only one child, and then, after she has taken a serious break from the upheavals of youth. Alina laughed, and she herself dreamed of her own large family, in which, of course, there would be a baby and not alone. Mikhail, of course, did not talk about the child immediately after they met. It would be strange, but I listened to stories about tricks. Alina's brothers with pleasure, wondering how early she was once entrusted with babies. You will be a wonderful mother, he said with conviction. And I will be there if you and I have children together. In fact, it was his explanation in feelings. Mikhail was not particularly willing, and, frankly speaking, after 6 months of meetings with him, Alina almost resigned herself to the fact that is unlikely to hear romantic confessions from Misha. And suddenly this happened at once. Then she was very confused, blushed. smiled stupidly and said something like, "Oh, really? Well, what are you talking about? Are you serious?" She and Mikhail met a little funny, not particularly romantic and, of course, completely by accident, just by the will of fate in one place at the same time. Alina had already lived in a big city for a year and studied at a medical school. The choice of her future profession came as a surprise to her relatives. Everyone assumed that, taking into account grandmother's genes and experience. For the education of her brothers, Alina will go to enter a pedagogical institute or, if you do not think about higher education, he will plan to get a profession, for example, a cook. Moreover, by the end of school, Alina, under the tireless guidance of Zinoids Grigorievna, achieved considerable success in cooking. She dashingly rolled and twisted a variety of household preserves, cooked soups and baked pies, and her signature roast of pork and eggplant, cooked simply with some features known only to Alina herself, even her grandmother recognized as a masterpiece. "No, thank you," Alina chuckled to the surprise of her relatives. "Of course, I like to cook, but somehow it was infused in the kitchen. Aren't you tired of smearing your knees and elbows with brilliant green?" The grandmother smiled in response. "I'm also tired, so I will get the profession of a doctor and do serious things," Alina said. She did not pass the medical institute by points and entered the school. "I liked city life and not. On the one hand, it was great to feel around me, seething, continuously. Modern life moving at a tremendous pace, to hear the breath of a huge city and to feel part of it. I liked to stand at the window and look at the brightly lit facades of autumn houses, imagining people living behind them. Follow the flashing multicolored cars with your eyes, wander along the stone embankments. Sit at a table of a small street cafe, imagining herself a bored city beauty, and on the other hand, fatigue periodically rolled in. She wanted silence, special, such as simply does not exist in the city, so complete that she herself would be alive. I wanted to take a deep breath without the risk of choking and coughing. I wanted to see greenery without a grayish coating of dust and even the evening soft twilight, only illuminated here and there. Rare light seemed welcome. But most importantly, I really wanted to go home. To my grandmother, ironic, endlessly wise and kind, to her parents, who still look like two schoolchildren who are cheerfully afraid of what they have now. They will ask about grades. Even Anton and Semyon, who occasionally spoiled her life, although they had grown up and seemed to be even. Who had partially come to her senses, she was also very sad. Probably, the reason was not only in the craving for a small homeland. It's just that Alina was alone. Of course, there were acquaintances, classmates at the school, girls with whom it was pleasant chat. There was a roommate Ridka, a beautiful and noisy girl who was constantly in difficult and stormy relationship with another gentleman and demanded Alya's sympathy. There was even a platonic admirer, though more imaginary than real, and it was still nice. He was a tall, gray-haired old man, apparently living somewhere in the neighborhood. Alina often saw him walking in the field with an old fat dachshund on a leash, as gray as he was. Seeing Alina, he invariably took off the old-fashioned hat he seemed to wear all year round, broke into a smile and bowed easily. She even gave him the nickname Chekhov about herself. Obviously, because of the round glasses in thin gold frame and some elusive but elegant old-fashionedness. And yet, Alina felt very lonely, and after periodic trips home, she became even worse. That day, Alina had a toothache. In principle, she did not know how to get sick and could not learn, because neither in childhood, nor as I grew older, I simply did not know what colds, viruses, all kinds of insufficiencies and chronic ailments were. And it was difficult to grow up another under the guidance of Zinaida Grigorievna, who was sincerely convinced that most of the diseases that exist in the world are fiction, and the rest have only one cause, idleness. Having moved to the city, Alina, of course, began, like everyone else, to periodically catch the same viruses, but especially she did not succumb to malaise, and all problems were habitually treated with honey, lemon, and a sound healing sleep. But neither lemon, nor honey, nor even sleep could help here. On the contrary, due to the unpleasant sensations, which were getting worse, she hardly slept all night. The gum swelled and twitched with a strong throbbing pain that pierced the whole head, so there was nothing left but to go to the clinic. The queue to the dentist was decent and, apparently, consisted of sufferers like herself. "Oh, I'm in a lot of pain," Alina tried to fight for herself somehow, feeling her tooth literally throbbing, as if puffed up. "And I'm sitting here like this for pleasure." a huge ant said with a threat, who, because of her size, occupied 2 seats at once. What a smart girl, everyone is waiting, and you are waiting. Alina sighed and, huddled into a ball, fell silent on the edge of the bench. Girl, it's my turn next. Please, you come in my place. I'm letting you pass, she suddenly heard a soft male voice. She pressed her hand to her swollen cheek and looked up. In front of her stood a short young man with rusty hair and slightly protruding ears, which, perhaps, because of the color of their hair, or maybe because of the lighting in the corridor, they seemed to be illuminated by a reddish color. It was so funny that Alina couldn't help but chuckle. But you are especially ungrateful, Alina Alexeyevna, to say the least, flashed through her head. The men of you. He felt sorry for him, let this malicious ant go ahead of him, who, perhaps, will sit in an armchair for half an hour, and then you have to get out of it for the same amount of time, because it will probably get stuck in it, and instead of thanking it, you laugh. Thank you, she mumbled in confusion under the plump mouth and under the heavy gaze of the big ant, very displeased with this development, squeezed into the dentist's office. Mind you, you're going to take her turn, she heard a threat behind her back, clearly addressed to her savior. After 20 minutes, Alina, almost relieved of the pain, happily smiling, left the office. Dodging the 2-seater and rushing forward, she looked at the red-haired guy. Are you all right? He asked and smiled. Yes, almost, Alina nodded. Once again, thank you very much and good luck. Excuse me, maybe you can wait for me a little. Suddenly the guy said. Although here, of course, you don't want such a place in. Not a single extra minute. I understand. Sorry, I shouldn't. And in general, I will. I'll wait, but it's good outside, Alina said unexpectedly to herself. Judging by his face, it was an even bigger surprise for him. His eyes flashed with distinct joy. He jumped to his feet, uncertainly stretched out his hand to her, and immediately pulled it away. Alina grabbed his palm, shook it hard and said, Alina, it's very nice. Mikhail, he smiled. And what is he smiling at? Alina thought then embarrassedly. Leaving the dentist's office, she managed to look back at her reflection. The traces of swelling on the face have not yet passed. Her cheek was protruding from the cotton swab pressed against the gum. In addition, after almost sleepless night and morning suffering, shaggy, without at least conditional makeup, she, in her own opinion, was a real scarecrow, and certainly not an object of attention from a young man, even if he himself is not handsome. However, after getting rid of the torment and breathing air, she even ran to the toilet. She refreshed her face and was still dissatisfied with her appearance. And why did I blurt out that I would wait for him? Who pulled the tongue, she wondered to herself, sitting on the bench. He can give up. And get up and leave, not thinking that he will suffer greatly from this. And for some reason, she continued to sit still, casting a glance at the entrance to the clinic. At last he went out, swore an oath, apparently not counting on anything special, and suddenly, seeing her, he raised his head and straightened it. Shoulders and as if he had even become taller and stepped towards her, looking at Lena with large dark browns, eyes shining with inexplicable joy. Mikhail was a native city dweller, quite prosperous and well-off, in the generally accepted sense, young man. If you approach the issue purely practically, it was an excellent option for the homeless and inactive Alina. Couple. Years ago, he graduated from a law school, worked in a large company, earned very well and felt quite confidently. In terms of housing, he was also in perfect order. This order had the appearance of a decent apartment, however, only a one-room one, as he reported with some embarrassment. But for Alina, who lived for a couple of years in a rented room, from which she could be asked at any time, a separate and most importantly own housing seemed a luxury. True, she did not visit this apartment very soon. Mikhail was an unusually thorough, timid and old-fashioned gentleman. It took him a long time to decide to invite Alina at least just to visit, and did it only after a couple of months of joint trips to the cinema, cafes and parks. Listen, Bear, Alina was surprised when they got closer, got to know each other well and could speak any themes. Sometimes I have the feeling that you are a person from the last century, or even more simply, as if it is you, a girl from the. In any case, you are clearly more embarrassed than I am. Alina laughed. Mikhail supported and jokingly waved it off, but his flushed cheeks and flushed ears fully confirmed Lincoln's theory. Earlier than with his apartment, Alina met Mikhail's mother. She prepared for this meeting long and thoroughly, desperately cowardly, and trying to imagine a place of an unknown woman, for example, his grandmother. But I immediately threw the thought out of my head. If at least 10% of the character and determination of Zinaida Grigorievna awaits her there, Alina, is finished. Indeed, what mother in her right mind and firm memory would approve of such a candidate for marriage for an only son? A villager, Nikola is not from the yard, dressed SOSO. You can argue about intelligence. The profession is, as it were, almost there. Noble, of course, and necessary, but not particularly prestigious. Surely the woman dreamed of an educated daughter-in-law with some clean, prestigious, and good paid work, which they go to in a stylish suit, beige coat, and high-heeled shoes. And she, Alina, with heels, if I may say so, is on you. Of course, he knows how to walk, but not particularly confidently, and, most importantly, for a very short time. In general, as they say, wherever you throw, there is a wedge everywhere. It turns out that this is such a provincial upstart who grabbed a city guy. And it would be okay if she were still a beauty, otherwise the assembly is special. Well, a nose, neat, with some cute freckles, well. Gray eyes with dark eyelashes, which were always envied by her friends. In fact, all its advantages are somehow not enough. You cook well, the saving thought helpfully slipped her consciousness. The husband will be well fed. Mothers-in-law always. They love it when their sons are deliciously fed. But immediately Alina realized that even all her culinary skills were very little to feel confident. Again, it is unlikely that the ultimate dream of Misha's mother is a semi-cook as a daughter-in-law. Lowering her self-esteem to the level of the plinth, Alina was amazed when she was greeted with a smile by a short, thin woman who looked like a librarian. "Come in, Alinaka." "Oh, can I call you that?" A woman with a slight cozy name, Anna Ivanovna, took Alina. I shook it tightly and shook it firmly, warming it with warm, dry palms at the same time. "I'm very glad to meet you," She looked at the bride frozen in the middle of the hallway and laughed softly. "True, I am very happy. Believe it or not." In general, everything turned out to be easy and simple with Mikhail's mother. Anna Ivanovna was one of those rare women who did not consider her son, his thoughts and feelings to be her lifelong property. In any case, if Anna Ivanovna did not fully approve of her son's choice, she hid her dissatisfaction somewhere very deep. My brothers, high school students, restrained by the stern looks of their parents, were tormented by unrealized ideas, but they held on. Alexei dragged his future son-in-law fishing, after which he made his own conclusion. A normal guy, a real fisherman, only he does not know how to plant worms, he does not know how to cast fishing rods and spinning. He does not distinguish crucian carp from perch, but otherwise well done. Mikhail smiled shyly, bravely endured the mysterious disappearance of his sneakers, cheerfully hobbling in galoshes, and gratefully listened to Irina's stories about family life. But the most indelible impression on him, of course, was made by Zinaida Grigorievna. A terrific woman, he nodded with conviction after being sent to the cellar for pickled butterflies. He returned from there, was called the city dunce, because he brought not butterflies at all, but honey mushrooms, and was sent again. A little weak, of course, like all city people, Zinaida Grigorievna summed up at parting, but amen. Good. And you know, Alinaka, he loves you. She married Mikhail, settled in his apartment. However, they did not jostle for long in the small square. Mikhail unexpectedly quickly rushed up the career ladder, and in a few years he was the head of the legal department. A large holding, even a very large one, judging by the spacious apartment they moved into, and Mishka's business suit. They lived well, in complete harmony, without passions and strain. Well, God forbid with them, with passions. Not everyone needs them. Alina. She was quite satisfied with the quiet, cozy family happiness next to Misha. However, Alina never entered the medical school. Somehow everything was postponed, it didn't work out, it was a little scary. Al, maybe you don't need it anymore. Mikhail reasoned softly. I make good money. I gave us a normal life. I will provide. And you will give birth to a child for me, or better 2 or 3, as in your family. Yes, Alinka, think for yourself. With a baby. And even with kids, well, what kind of study? Especially in the medical one. After all, it is terrible how difficult it is to study, and even longer than everywhere else. There was a reason in Mikhail's reasoning, although Lena was gnawed by a worm that she dreamed, and now you are betraying your dream. But Misha was talking about the children she herself had dreamed of all her life and much more than about the profession of a doctor. Several years passed imperceptibly one after another in business, fuss, and plans. To the amazement of Alina, who is used to the fact that children appear and grow literally like mushrooms after the rain, she and Misha have had a long time. Nothing worked, and the more desire and joy was the news that fell on them. Alinaka, dear, how great! Mikhail rejoiced. I wish the baby had already appeared, and I would meet you. From the hospital with your favorite white chrysanthemums and a balloon. And what is the ball for? Ali smiled. Be sure to use a balloon, he nodded. Since childhood, I have loved balloons. Pink if a girl is born, blue if a son is born. Laughing. Stupid, right? Well, let me do it anyway. I've always dreamed of it. And then the months of pregnancy dragged on. Alina was getting heavier, changing. For some reason she began to panic for the baby and herself, although she had no special reasons for this. I was sick mainly for small things. Although, according to the same Zinaida Grigorievna, who often came to the city to visit granddaughters, all these ailments existed only in the head of Alina herself and the doctors who were observing her. Some kind of nonsense. The elderly woman was angry. You're sitting here, lounging around, and you're sick. I would come home, run. I wish they're between the beds from old memory. I breathed the air, crunched the carrots and apples, I would have lost all the ailments and would not have noticed how. As the appointed time approached, Alina's character suddenly began to deteriorate, and the reason was, in her opinion, in Mikhail. He also changed a lot, became laconic, withdrawn, but most importantly, he began to spend much more time at home. Less time, making excuses with business, work. Well, what do you want? The grandmother replied to Alina's complaints. Very talkative and sociable Michael is yours. Actually, I have never been, and now even more so. What should he talk to you about? About your blood sugar levels. About edema. About which diapers are better. That's another dirty trick. You were raised somehow without diapers. Of course, everything is very much for him. It's fascinating. And you don't talk about anything else yourself. He's even with me. And you talk like that. Alka, listen to yourself. You didn't even chase chickens in such a nasty voice when you were little. And how you have always disliked them. And whine, well, how can I communicate with you? That is, I am to blame for everything. Alina choked with indignation, not paying attention to Zinaida's half-joking tone. Both are to blame, the grandmother slashed with conviction. But you're a woman, you should be smarter, more patient, I don't know. And you don't have patience, you don't have a conscience. You've quit your job, and who's supposed to earn money for all your cribs, rags, multivitamins, histamines? Forgive me. Lord, I also came up with all sorts of nonsense to drink. You're stupid from idleness. Zinaida Grigorievna resolutely stopped her granddaughter, who was eager to object, apparently deciding to say everything to the end. What hurts? And besides, what should Mikhail do at home now? It is not normal for him to eat here, not to rest. Prepare. You have stopped, you do not allow anyone to touch you, as if you are a crystal vase. Forgive me, Lord. And to be honest, I don't have much desire. Look at yourself. You sit and mess up. Her hair is dirty. There's a stain on your pajamas. By the way, why are you still in pajamas? It's noon outside, your house is a mess. It's disgusting to go into the kitchen, by the way. Explain this to me. Well, you've decided that you can't do anything. But why feed your husband under this bench? Stopped. And in general, to be honest, if anyone here looks emaciated, it's Mikhail, not you. Zinaida Grigorievna frowned angrily. You know, granddaughter, if it were not for your interesting situation, I would have struck you in one place from old memory. I don't really recognize you, how my Alinka was replaced. To hear this from a grandmother who, despite her formidable resolute character, has never touched it in her life. For some reason, Callie and her brothers were especially offended by even a finger. You know, I'm actually pregnant, I'm going to give birth soon, she said with anguish. And you blame me for everything. Well, I'll tell you so. The fact that you're pregnant, well, you're not the first, you're not the last, Granny grinned. And also, My dear, pregnancy is not a disease, but a joy, and for both of you. So think about how you can return this joy with it. Alina was then deeply offended by her grandmother for her rebuff. What is she really talking about? It's hard for her, Ali. The boy is big, she is constantly told about it, she is advised to take care in every possible way. They even want to put you in the hospital as soon as possible. Strangers understand how difficult it is for her, and their own relatives. Her husband, grandmother, even her mother, it turns out, believe that she is just a self-obsessed hysteric. So what? No one tells her directly, but it's clear. From the last conversation with my grandmother, the words about how Alya looks especially cut into my ears. After seeing Zenaida off, she went to the mirror. Well, okay, you can wash your hair, although it will definitely wait today, until tomorrow. She'll change her pajamas, so be it. But what to do with edema? However, the grandmother claims that this is her lying on the pillow. But it is clear that she is unfair to her and Kalina. And soon there was the first unpleasant conversation with Mikhail. He was sitting on the sofa and watching TV, on the screen of which a beautiful girl in a red tight-fitting dress confidently promised literally the whole planet wonderful weather for tomorrow. What, are you looking at it? Alina asked unexpectedly. For what? Mike was surprised. To the southern Kurils, she grinned. Ali. Well, the south of the Urals is also so wow. What are you talking about, Aline? Mikhail frowned. That you're ready to look at anyone, anywhere, but not at me, she shouted. Even in the weather forecast. You stare as if this is the most interesting thing that can be in the world. Ale, stop it. If you're in a bad mood again, please don't take it out on me. Mikhail got up and left the room. I don't look good. Yes, she asked him once head on. Well, how to say, Mikhail clearly did not have time to react, and involuntarily he gave out the truth, and then came to his senses and muttered. No, Al, don't listen to me. I'm a fool. Everything is fine with you. Yes, of course. You have changed a little, but it is clear that it is difficult for you, and the baby does not allow you to sleep normally. And you eat only what he allows you, and not what you want and love. Mikhail tried to smile cheerfully. I see, so it's really bad, she nodded. That's why you began to stay late at work so often that I see less. Listen, she suddenly jumped up, as if a sudden thought had occurred to her. And is it at work? Ali, what are you saying? Mikhail replied and for some reason flushed. And his main trader's ears literally flashed with 2 rubies. What are you tired of? Ugly and clumsy village wife, Alina was carried away. I decided to look for entertainment on the side. So far, there is nothing interesting at home. You know, I want to remind you what it is, she pointed emphatically to her stomach. This is your child. It's because of him that I blossomed so much. Listen, Ali, please stop. You're talking nonsense. He grimaced in annoyance. Well, of course, I'm ugly, a bad housewife, and even a fool who talks complete nonsense. Alina was completely offended and almost did not control herself. Mikhail looked attentively at his wife, got up and went out. He now did this almost every time after their so-called family conversations. The situation was heating up. Alina clung to Mikhail. He tried his best to avoid it. Most often, literally coming home it's late. And a couple of times he spent the night at all, according to him, in the office. In this situation, Alina listened to her doctor's words almost with relief. Well, Alina Alexeyevna, in general, everything is fine, but let's put you in the hospital for a week. Later. If everything goes well, check out for a few days, take a walk. Well, you are welcome to give birth. Well, take a break from my whining, she blurted out to Mikhail. You relax in a normal, so to speak, environment and maybe even more than one. Well, everything is in the offices. Ali, this is simply unbearable. Mikhail rubbed the bridge of his nose. What do you want from me? Nothing, Alya shouted. I don't want anything from you. Leave me alone forever. Well, as you say, he said through clenched teeth. And here she is lying on a hospital bed, looking at the wall and, just as in the hospital paint, does not see anything joyful in the life ahead of her. Oh, hello, Alina heard a ringing female voice that literally pulled her out of her thoughts. A short, curvy, but at the same time slender woman with a small neat tummy entered the ward, accompanied by a nurse. Ladies with such feminine figures are called appetizing by the figurative and apt word. In addition, pregnancy clearly suited the woman, emphasizing her beauty, making her brighter. Alina herself has frankly lost weight over these months, and this was completely objective. Therefore, looking at the blossoming, literally bursting with heat and energy newcomer, she sighed enviously. The newcomer looked around the room in a masterly manner and resolutely moved to the bed next to Alina. You have normal wards and free beds, otherwise, you know, they put me in with some money. No. I want to take this place here, she nodded to the nurse, who was trying to turn the wayward patient in the other direction. It will be more convenient for me here. The nurse, apparently already convinced that it was pointless to argue with the lady, raised her eyes to the ceiling, took a deep breath, waved her hand and went out. Well, that's how it is. Oh, are you alone here? Just a VIP ward. The newcomer laughed. Well, let's get acquainted. I'm Ludmilla. Luda, that is. She said decisively, sitting down opposite her. Oh, is it Little Red Riding Hood? Love. In general, I love all sweets, but these ones especially. True, they have become expensive, just terrible. And where are the prices raised? How? As if everyone earns millions. I used to buy them often too. Well, there are hats, bears, all sorts of Alianka. And now? As you look at the price tag, everything itches in advance. She laughed heartily at her joke. Why don't you eat? And I would eat it. Otherwise, I'm going to go for an examination now. And I always, when I go to the doctors, I start to freak out. Simply. Horror. And what good can these doctors say? If only they understood what. Well, I'll take a candy from you. What's your name? She finished her tirade, starting to unwrap the wrapper. Oh, yes, of course. Please help yourself, Alina finally said, stunned by such a rapid acquaintance. And I. Alina. Alina. Alya, then. Oh, that's the name of one of my friends. There was such an infection, I can tell you. Listen, let's go straight to the. You, okay? Because I don't like to roll it out somehow. Listen, how are the doctors here? No problem. But the truth is that the head of the department here is a man. No, well, it's just some kind of disgrace, right? Why? Alina was surprised. How the lady threw up her hands. In the women's department, there is also a male head. So what's wrong with that? Alya shrugged her shoulders. This is normal. In fact, the gender of the doctor does not matter at all. Well, maybe it doesn't have for you, but for me it really does. And in general, our medicine is a complete mess. I agree. Ludmilla looked expectantly at Alya. No, Alina shook her head, finally having time to answer Ludmilla's question, who, it seems, has no answers for conversation. And they were especially needed. No, I don't agree, even more than that. I work in this, as you say, mess. True, I never managed to enter the institute, but I am a nurse. Come on, Ludmilla agreed easily. Apparently. Despite her beliefs, she was not going to argue and conflict. Listen, we agreed on you. What is your term? Have you been lying down for a long time? Oh, listen, how do they feed here? One porridge or something. Do they still give it? Boiled eggs are given. I respect them very much. I can eat 6 or even 7 pieces at once, can you imagine? Mine. The doctor says, you can't put a load on the liver, like pancreatitis, cholesterol, all that. She understands a lot about it, and I eat it anyway. And nothing, she shook with laughter. Alina closed her eyes. The vigor of the new. My roommates were starting to scare me a little. At the same time, the words constantly pouring out of her did not disturb the woman at all. Mind your own business. She quickly stuffed things into the shelves in the bedside table, threw on a bright stylish dressing gown and I stopped at a small mirror hanging above the sink. They're cleaning up here SOSO, there's dust on the mirror, she drawled, carefully examining her reflection. And there was something to see. The lady, who called herself Ludmilla, was very attractive and literally blossomed with the curvaceous feminine. Beauty, which becomes especially bright in some women in an interesting position. Thick blonde hair, clean matte skin, regular facial features, large green eyes. Everything was wonderful, and surely it would have been even better if it hadn't been for the capricious disgruntled expression that gives all this beauty. Inexplicable, but clearly visible scandalousness. The first impression did not deceive. Ludmila turned out to be a big fan of talking. 2 hours before, Alina learned a lot about Ludmila and that this was not her first pregnancy, if you count everything. And she is. Ludmila knows more about this than these doctors, and she agreed to stay in the hospital so that they could get off. And my neighbor in the apartment, to be honest, is very tired of me, Luda chuckled. We rent an apartment for 2, she is already exhausted, everything, you see, is uncomfortable for her. Alina imagined herself in the place of her neighbor Ludmila and sincerely felt sorry for the unfortunate woman. In general, I decided, well, what, since they lie down themselves? Well, I'll lie in the hospital at the expense of the state. Then Alina was informed that it was simply impossible to live in the city expensively. Although she, Ludmila, thought that she would come. Will study to be a manicurist and will earn normally. So enough for a decent life. But for now, somehow, it doesn't work out very well, so you need to settle down differently. And how else can you get a job, if not with the help of a man? Or more precisely, not at his expense. Moreover, appearance allows. And not without education. She studied at a trade college and graduated from secretarial courses 2 months ago. Lucky. I got a job in a normal company. He pays well. True, so far it only shifts papers, well, nothing, and Moscow does not. It was immediately built. The main thing is that there is complete order with the men and there are promising candidates, especially one. And he is definitely 100% in love with her. She, Ludmila, knows what she is talking about. Here Luda winked, obviously expecting a lively interest and clarifying questions from Alina. Alya was saved by the fact that the patients lying in the department were invited to dinner. Ludmila became very animated and rushed to the dining room as fast as if she had been invited to a banquet in a restaurant with a rating. At least 3 stars according to the international classification. The rest of the evening was devoted to discussing this particular dinner, in particular, the issue of feeding in the country's hospitals. In general, Ludmila, who, in contrast to Alya, visited medical institutions a lot and often, was a real specialist in this matter. In the morning, Ludmila, cheerful and fresh, as if she was not in the hospital, but somewhere in a resort, smiled at Alina from her bed. Listen, are you married? She began a new conversation. Oh, well, I see. You, city dwellers, have it easier with this. You have more normal men here. I, in fact, am also not a local, I came to the city 7 years ago, Alya explained. Yes, well done, Ludmila admired. From a yoke, that is, from the city. I didn't make a fool of anyone, Alina was indignant. We met quite by accident in the queue to the dentist. She smiled, remembering her acquaintance with Misha. We met, liked each other, started dating, then got married. Well, yes, Luda nodded. Love, then, at first sight. Well, maybe not at first sight, and not even with second, but yes, love. Alina felt uncomfortable, people at the ironic wink. I love Misha, and he loves me, and it makes no difference who was born where. Well, yes, of course, only you jumped out to marry a city man anyway, and not to yourself. Ludmila left behind. Last word and abruptly changed the subject. And I need a local and at least something to suffocate him. No, an oligarch is not needed. Where should I go with my secretarial courses? And I'm already too old. Luda laughed. I'm one of those. Who would like to hold a titmouse in his hand? And let the cranes and God be with them to fly. And you know, I have such a titmouse in mind. The father of the child, Alina made a logical conclusion. A child, Luda asked, as if she was not pregnant. And no, what are you? This is from something else. Well, what? It's time to give birth. I'm going to be 30 soon. Then go, it will be too late. That is, you. Pregnant from one, and going to frown with another. Is that so? Alina was amazed. So what? Luda shook shoulders. Think about it, a child. And then my mother can't wait to give birth to my grandson. So let him educate, and I need to arrange my life. Moreover, luck itself goes into your hands. I told you that I work in one big office. So there is the head of the fool, well, just an ideal candidate. You know, so quiet, modest, stupid. It's even strange that he is a great lawyer at the same time. Well, there are just men with whom women do what they want. Well, this is definitely one of them. By the way, imagine his. Also Mikhail's name, like your husband. So, he definitely had a crush on me. I unmistakably define such things. Is he cute? Alina spoke slowly, cautiously, as if afraid of hurting herself by the words. Yes, just not tall. Red, and his ears stick out, but, in general, this is not the main thing for a man. It is important that he earns very decently. And what is the name of the company? Alina asked, burning the last bridge behind her. And when she heard Luda's answer, she turned to the wall. You're a scoundrel. I don't want to have anything else to do with you. It's just my baby, she said when they met when she was discharged from the hospital. Alya, you have no right to say that. This is the same child of mine as yours, Mikhail sang up. I don't know what you're accusing me of. It's just unbearable, but I won't let you take my son away from me. Oh, well, yes, you are a high-class lawyer. But women talk to you, do what they want. Especially blonde with appetizing shapes named Ludmila. Yes, she stared at him. What are you talking about? What Ludmilas, Mikhail drawled. Beautiful. At least, this is a specific one for sure. And I'm so sure of you that even a child is not a hindrance to her, Alina chuckled. You know, Mikhail said seriously, it seems to me that one of us is crazy. I know who, Alina nodded. I did a long time ago, when I married you. Mikhail shook his head and, as usual, left the room. Oh, what people? Alina, do you recognize her? We met again. Ludmila's voice was impossible to confuse with something else. Are you already giving birth, and I've come to lie down again? Music, well, how are you doing? Well, with this head of the department, Alina asked cautiously. Ah, a hopeless option. I made a mistake with him, Ludmila waved her hand. He turns out to be married. Idea. Although the girls in the accounting department say that there is some kind of village clown. Oh, I'm sorry, you don't get offended. She, by the way, is also pregnant and arranged a fun life for him. She drove the men away, and instead of leaving her, he endures everything, waits for something. Well, what is she from a toad to a princess? Turn. Where are these men's brains? As if there are few normal women around. She clearly meant herself, adjusting a lock of hair. At the discharge, Alina shifted her eyes from her grandmother to her father's frightened happy face, the same as her mother's, to the grinning face of her brothers, and again to her grandmother. It was joyful and painful, and also ashamed and lonely, despite the happy relatives. Yes, here he is, Zinaida Grigorievna's grumpy voice rang out. Your husband turned out to be smarter than you. Fathers, take off your shoes. Alina wiped her eyes, took a closer look and gasped happily. A blue balloon hovered above their heads, twitching merrily on a string. Mish, I'm sorry, Alina said. I was such a fool, I am so guilty before you. Alinaka, dear, it's all such nonsense, muttered Mikhail. It doesn't matter at all. The main thing is that you are with me and our baby.